This is BBC Two for the Eastern Counties. 20 years after its foundation, Matter of Fact tells the story of Old Hall in Suffolk, England's largest commune.
Something new, adventurous, exciting, different, the prospect of a much more interesting life ahead.
A sharing of ideals, a sharing of a lifestyle. We wanted to put that vision into a reality.
It's 1974. For many, city life has become a rat race. A group of families who barely know each other sell their homes, risking everything to begin a new life together. In a documentary made 6 months after the birth of Old Hall Community, they expressed their hopes and dreams. 20 years on, this is their story. Old Hall in Suffolk is the largest community of its kind in England. The 58 inhabitants share the running of the house, the 70-acre farm, and their everyday lives.
Well, I cook once a week. That's my rota jobs, really. You don't have to cook, but I prefer it, really, to washing up or putting out the compost. It's a much nicer job. You put down the meals that you eat, and in fact they're very cheap. I think we were just saying on Friday that in the past 10 years the cost of meals has been the same. Averages out at 32 pence per meal, and half for children.
Here we are.
We grow our own food. I mean, we put in the hours on the land, and it's all voluntary, so that's what does it, really.
A 5-year plan has been worked out to develop the fields with crops and livestock. Many of the men hope eventually to be able to quit their jobs outside and work on the land full time. Already there's talk of becoming self-sufficient.
What do we use the milk for? Well, as one uses milk, but of course we use it for butter and cheese as well. And yogurt, yes. But we have enough basically to sort out the milk demands of the community most of the time. It depends on the season and so on. It's nice, basically. Keeps getting more contact with the cow that way, I think. I mean, machines are all very well and all do it very quickly, and we could sort of like go off and have a cup of tea and come back, but it's just nicer to do it this way. That's my thoughts anyway.
We've, as a community, become self-sufficient in some areas, and a lot of hard work has gone into that, and a lot of joy and sharing has gone into that, and celebrations from it. There have been good experiences in that time. But there also has to be a realism that we can never be totally self-sufficient, and I think we learnt that early on.
This dilapidated cowshed is being rebuilt by women intent on doing the whole job themselves. It's their own project, and the men are happy to let them get on with it. Their roles aren't always reversed, but sometimes a woman's got to do what a man used to do.
Had you seen us in the first years, you'd have seen women queuing up to learn to drive the tractor, and men making bread, doing domestic chores, doing lots of cooking. Working parties where women were women and men were perhaps learning some plumbing or glazing or whatever. But ultimately, having proved that we could do these things, we settled down into what everybody likes doing best, which on the whole was women cooking and gardening and men doing anything mechanical. That's not to say there haven't been women who've come with very good practical skills and who like doing mechanical things, dealing with being on the tractor. But on the whole, if a job comes up now that requires somebody to use a piece of machinery, there'll be no shortage of men waiting to do it.
Most of the men and women haven't quit their jobs outside the community, but the demands of Old Hall make it hard to have a full-time career, so many have compromised and work only part-time. John Gamlin left behind a career as a senior lecturer when he came here.
I felt that living in community was a richer social environment than the nuclear family. But later that developed into an interest in the environmental movement and the belief that one approach to solving environmental problems is living in a wider social setting and being able to share material goods and hence make less demand on the environment. There'll always be that feeling, well, what would I be doing now had I not given up my career and all the perks that go with it? But intellectually, I mean, that's perhaps the emotional side. Intellectually, I don't say that what I did was wrong. In the old situation, we couldn't do this. We didn't go and tend to knock on the door on the house next door and say, I just had a blazing eye on my wife. What can you do about it? Because they don't tend to know us that way, in that way. But I think this is something we should be able to do and not feel there's anything wrong about it.
Most of them were strangers when they moved in. Even now, 6 months later, many feel there's still a lot more they need.
Unlike the Gamlins, Mike Norris left Old Hall. His daughter is too young to remember these community feelings meetings. 20 years ago, it was Mike who spoke out against them.
I've got a sort of gut feeling against going to a sort of meeting where we want this sort of frank and honest discussions about feelings and things, because I want to prolong the individual bit. I want to, talk to people face to face and find out, whether they clean their bath afterwards and things like that.
I got halfway through that diatribe and thought, what bloody hell am I talking? Nobody wants to listen to all this stuff.
Well, it got on the TV, so it can't have been that bad.
Yeah.
Whether I, feel strongly about relationships and things like that, I want to get to know the basics.
I think I'm more prepared to talk about feelings now than I was then. At the time, I was very, very uncomfortable in them. I suppose they did serve a very useful purpose because there were a lot of tensions around, and if nothing else, they acted as a safety valve for them, and it did bring certain things out in the open. But I'm more comfortable when feelings aren't so savagely aired, and I found it very difficult to cope with at that time.
The community knows from experience that there are dangers in seeking to develop relationships. It's probably the hardest obstacle they're faced with.
I think other people did bring problems here, and that was probably as much a reason for people coming here as was the need to experiment in setting up a sense of community here. I think people needed to escape from the lives they were in to some extent, and this was a good place to do it. And I mean, it was good in the sense that it was ruthless. If as an individual or as a partnership you had problems, then this place exposed them ruthlessly.
I have found myself attracted and involved with people here, and it does take getting used to and adjusting to this new situation. It is something which one is not used to coping with in the outside world, where one hasn't got such a wide variety of people surrounding one and where the temptations are not as great.
Martin Brown has moved away from Old Hall with his wife and family.
I notice this cherry tree isn't quite what it was. It was a tremendous focus for meals during the summer, and people came out of the refectory in here and put the benches out, and we had lovely meals underneath the cherry tree.
Returning to Old Hall, he's happy to remember the good times. The community has also put those early difficulties with relationships behind it.
Most of the couples here in the 1974 were in their 20s and 30s. And that, I think, was perhaps one of the problems at the time. There were too many couples in that age range, and there wasn't a broad enough spread. Now we've got more older members. It avoids some of the problems that we had in the early years of the attraction of one couple for another outside of marriage, which certainly did take place. But we don't seem to have that problem at all now.
I work 4 days a week teaching, which is quite good because I get home at a reasonable hour, so I can go milking after work, fit that in. I mean, you've got to enjoy being outside and being willing to do all those things, I think. To me, it's preferable to walking around a supermarket once a week. And if you're bringing up a family, you've got to work whichever way you look at it, I think. Lots of my friends come here and say, oh, I couldn't cope with this, I couldn't cope with getting on with all these different people, really. That's by far the most difficult bit of it. It's like being married to 40 different people, really. Quite difficult. If the community was smaller, you'd have to get on with everybody all the time, but you've also got your own units and you can just retire to it when you need to.
Old Hall is a housing association. A share costs up to £60,000, which entitles each member to their own living space or unit, as well as use of the communal areas. Maxine is a newcomer to the community.
Well, I came for several visits, which were weekends, and then spent a month here. And that was for me to find out if I liked the life here, and obviously for the members to find out if they liked me, and the children, obviously, to know if they wanted the children here as well. And after that process, and that took about two years, and then the deciding factor was this space was available, and I made the decision to come.
Okay, this is my bedroom, which is, as you can see, rather a nice space, which I haven't sort of decorated or anything yet, but hopefully we'll be doing soon. And then we come through here, and this is sort of like a little kitchen space. I want to actually do a lot more on that, because I actually find that a very important little space if you actually don't want to eat communally, or you just want to sort of like have a, you know, something light, like the kids just want beans on toast or something. So I actually am using it a lot more than perhaps I imagined I would be using it, even though there's communal meals. And then you come through, and this is our lounge, which is a lovely, one of the lovely things is the views and the light which come into the lounge. I suppose what I do miss is having an office, which I've always been used to, because I do a lot of work from home, and hence I've sort of like put my office, so to speak, in the lounge. And then from the lounge, this is Sam's bedroom, runs off. Okay, and through here is into the hallway, and this is my daughter's bedroom in here. And then that noise is what we call the dog, which is a sort of sign that we're using too much electricity, and you should sort of like pull out fires and switch off lights. If we go over a certain limit on the electricity, it means that we'd have to be paying more on our bills, and also we shouldn't be using that, you know, amount of electricity without being aware of it. So this here is, so to speak, my front door of my personal space here, with a door due to be fitted. And then we go through into the communal areas. And then here is the bathrooms that I share. And there's a toilet here, and then toilet and sinks here. And I suppose I share the bathroom with about 4 other adults and about 3 other children. Most days, it's actually, in fact, no problem whatsoever. You don't see anybody and you're in and out, and then suddenly you'll have a day when the door seems always shut and you can't get in. And that's it. That's my sort of space that I use on this personal basis.
as time has progressed, people have tended to retreat more to their units in the evenings, and the communal meals have not don't feature as largely as they used to in the early days. I mean, in the early days, people actually used to dress up for the evening meal. It was a semi-formal occasion, but all that's long since gone, and there's some people don't eat with the community at all. So I think there's been something of a retreat from, as it were, the search for commonality in the days in which we understood it right back in 1974.
There is this community aspect, a sharing of work, a sharing of problems, troubles, whether it's babysitting or, you know, what other aspects of a domestic life, and of course the sharing of the community project of trying to create something here, not only for ourselves, but for our children. Tremendous place for kids to grow up in, tremendous. The freedom, the learning of different skills and acquiring knowledge, acquiring responsibility in a safe way with other adults who care enough about them. That was there in '74, it still remains there now. The children have the easy time, it's the adults that have the hard time. Well, I think it's all ready now, that's okay.
You can go back the other way as well, can't you?
Yeah, if you tap twice, if you go...
It's more like having lots of friends around you rather than like a close brother and sister, because it's not the same sort of social setup as a family, but yet you have a lot of other people your own age who you'd play with and spend all your evenings with, basically. You'd spend all your time with. I did become conscious that I wasn't coming from a normal family background. It wasn't the normal sort of nuclear family household, which was fine for me, the old hall. I didn't mind that at all, but it was when I got to school and you'd get some sort of mocking and some people, because they basically didn't understand old hall. I was just different, and occasionally you'd get the mocking and the mickey taking, but often, like when I was younger, often the people that would mock, if they came to Old Hall for a birthday, they'd then go for it because they weren't used to the freedom, and they'd really appreciate what it was like here.
I was ill myself and had a very bad flu, and it was, a time for me when I actually was able to rest a lot more than I had been ever previously, because the children could go off, they could play, so that, I wasn't worrying about entertaining them, or that they were just wrecking the place while I was lying in bed. So they go off and play, and I know that they've been fed, and I know that they can get their food easily. I know that they'll get to school or be picked up, or if it's my turn on the rota, I can easily ask someone else to do it. So it's that level that it's there to use if you need to. Yes, that level of support.
Every weekday morning, one of the parents shepherds the children into an old minivan for the 1-mile trip to the local primary school.
The Old Hall children are nearly all in the very top ability bracket, and that is unusual, most interesting.
What causes that, do you think?
I could guess, but I don't know. I should imagine that the reasons that made people move into the Old Hall were partly reasons that they cared for their children. And if this caring parental interest also showed itself in early days in talking to their children, developing their children's interests, it might well be that that interest showed itself in high standards at school.
But there's fewer of them. And in the very early days, they were new to our village, sometimes a little bit timid. Now they seem sometimes like the oldest inhabitants. And they're a cross-section of abilities. Well, they're nice kids. They're mainly kids who have come from a loving environment, and that loving attitude shows in their life at school. We don't have actually any discipline problems at all from Old Hall children.
A year ago, the prospect of the sudden arrival of 30 people and their children was greeted with some suspicion in the conservative surrounds of East Bergholt.
one of the local councillors described it as a communist plot. I don't know what evidence he had for this. There's no communist party in East Bergholt yet, to my knowledge.
I think there was prejudice, which was absolutely shameful. But I haven't heard any criticism of Old Hall. I'm not aware of any prejudice at all now. They're just part of our village community, and a valued part.
Because it's the 20th anniversary and we're going to invite all the people who have had connections with Old Hall.
The community has survived through cooperation. All decisions are made by consensus, but it's not always possible to agree, and there have been some ideas that have never come to fruition.
We could perhaps not force the kids to go to school. We could allow them to stay, and they would be educated at home. So there's a possibility that I could perhaps, or some of us could, certainly, be at home educating children.
We were advocating a slightly more draconian approach to winding down the good things in life towards the ideal situation where your requirement from the environment at large was minimized. We should get rid of washing machines. This was a brilliant idea of mine, because of course everybody should wash their flares at the stream. And that caused a real furore, because I'd never done any washing, and I never intended to, and I don't think I've done any since. So that was wound down, and I think there was something of a compromise towards getting rid of automatic washing machines, because we knew how many litres of water they threw away. Since then, it has tended to go the other way, and that there are now enormous great laundromat machines. And they wanted industrial vacuum cleaners. They suddenly said, this place is not clean enough without real industrial power. And so they called in representatives from various industrial vacuum cleaner empires who came and sucked away for days. And I would sally forth and insult these chaps, and they'd run away in tears, trailing their flex behind them. And I don't think we didn't actually buy an industrial vacuum cleaner, and that was probably all my fault.
Peter left Old Hall to start his own community, but it didn't last. He bought out the other members, and now he and his family have the house to themselves. He also runs his own business, Goblin Whole Foods.
I've caught capitalism and realised that there are comforts in life which are quite enjoyable, particularly as the bones age. I've noticed this. A slightly softer approach to life. It's been tempered by the realisation that it is not intrinsically wrong, for example, to employ people, that it is not intrinsically wrong to make a profit, and that it is not intrinsically wrong to use the efficiencies that civilization can offer you, as long as you are aware of the real cost that has to be paid.
As I reflect upon the 20 years here, my judgment would be that we have moved to some extent from idealism to realism. But I think we now recognize that you can't take 40 disparate people with only a very loosely defined set of beliefs and try to weld them into an all-loving community.
It is better not to have any expectations, and then you're not disappointed. The difficulties can never be completely overcome, I suspect. They can be minimized by people working from a heartfelt love of their life and their sharing with their fellow human beings. If there's a desire, if the will is there from the heart, then all will succeed.
In the old days, in the very early days, we had enormous enthusiasm, enormous energy, but also that there was the consciousness that everybody could make Old Hall, so that if you come in thinking, oh, I wish it were done another way, it's much more difficult for someone new to do that than it was for us in the early days, when we were prepared to keep changing things until we worked out what we liked best.
It's a much more bourgeois existence here. It's an easy lifestyle. The place has been
Yeah, this
done
building's been done up and it's cheap and
Yeah,
it's easy to
it's
get.
a cosy, easy existence.
Yeah, to
And-
get set in your ways, and everybody's older as well. Of
Well,
course.
that's right. That's a big, I think
Yeah,
that's
well,
a
they
big
don't have so
problem.
much energy to go out and work on the fields, and you know they've sorted out their own lives and just want things to carry along without too much upheaval and new ideas and things.
And then inevitably the fact that those of us who came in late 20s, early 30s are now 50s, and we haven't got the physical energy to do the things we could do. We have been anxious that there should be more younger people attracted to the community, so it is an ongoing concern.
But attracting younger people is not easy. Sarah and Stephen's parents have left Old Hall, but they can't become community members themselves because they don't have enough money to buy into the housing association.
Part of the reason I came back was because I did care for the place an awful lot. It has always seemed like home, and I wanted to come back and put all that energy back in and try and influence it in a way, I suppose, to guide it in directions that I'd like to see it moving.
I have to ask to stay, and there's been people who've not been happy about me living here for one reason or another, and it's been quite upsetting for me actually having to ask to live in my own home. It does affect us a lot because you know you're not seen as having the same say, and it's
The same rights, even.
yeah.
You know, we feel, I think, as much members of here as anyone. And yet,
But you're just seen in a totally different light if you haven't put in that necessary. You know, it's seen as more commitment if you've got £60,000 worth of commitment.
It's sort of so difficult to get in and out. Now, one may think of that as a disadvantage, and to some extent it is, and this is something that we are addressing by trying to get a mortgage arrangement, which we've never had up to the moment. It's also a source of strength in that you can't simply up sticks if you feel aggrieved with somebody and go off because you have put in a lot of money into the community, and it takes some time to get that money out.
Old Hall has survived because it has adapted. As long as it can continue to do so, the community is confident it will live on.
I believe in community. Wherever I go, I would live in community in one form or another. What the future brings, I don't know. When I get my guidance as to where I shall be, I'll be there.
In the light of this famous statement from Mrs. Thatcher about there's no such thing as community, only individuals and families, that the message of community is probably more important now than it was then, living as we do in what is a much more individualistic and competitive society, with all the social problems that generates.
And short of the building actually falling down, I think there will be families, people of all ages living here for many years to come. Perhaps they'll end up living fairly independently in their separate units. They might even end up eating separately. I don't think any of that would be a tragedy, as long as the people who live here enjoy living here together, enjoy the house, enjoy the land, enjoy going on being at Old Hall.
There's a discussion on community starting now on BBC Local Radio. You can phone in on 0604 234455.
The Holy Grail, the True Cross, the bones of dead saints. Objects from the past that retain the power of their history. Relics venerated by the faithful for 1,000 years. This Easter, Arena sets out on a quest for relics in the 20th century.